Welcome to the party. You found the Mouse Castle Lounge, the place to be for good times and great conversations from the world of Disney. The bar is open, your table is waiting, and drinks are now being served. Come on in. And now, here's your host, the keeper of the Mouse Castle Lounge, Tim Calloway.
Welcome to the lounge. It's December 20th, 2015, and I'm Tim Calloway. We've got a terrific show for you today. I wrap up my two-part conversation with Disney historian Jim Korkis. We'll be talking about his book, The Vault of Walt, Volume 4. And then, as kind of a change of pace for the lounge, I pay a visit to the Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California, to celebrate the spirit of Christmas. But first, the festive thing to do this holiday season is to make sure you're following the Mouse Castle by visiting us on Facebook at facebook.com/The Mouse Castle. On Twitter, I am Disney Tim, and the Mouse Castle is also on Tumblr, Pinterest, and Instagram. Share your questions and comments by emailing us at podcast@themousecastle.com or call our listener line at 702-475-5MCL. That's 702-475-5625. And of course, you can always visit the blog at themousecastle.com, or you can download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app for your mobile device. Just click the pick that says, "Get the app." When you know as much stuff about Disney history as Jim Korkis does, you get asked a lot of questions. Sometimes it's pretty basic, like, when did Disneyland open? Other times it's more obscure, like, when did Mickey Mouse start wearing gloves? Then there's the question that's totally off the wall, like, how much does Walt Disney World weigh? No, really, somebody asked him that once. By the way, the answers are July 17th, 1955, in the 1929 cartoon The Opry House, and haven't got a clue. But I digress. Jim is back in the lounge once again, finishing up a conversation we started last week. We heard all about his latest book, Secret Stories of Walt Disney World. Today, we take a look at his other recent publication, The Vault of Walt, Volume 4. Jim always has terrific stories to tell about Disney, and today is no different. And stick around, because a little bit later, we'll be celebrating the spirit of Christmas at the Winchester Mystery House. But right now, it's my pleasure to welcome back Jim Korkis, my first guest today in the Mouse Castle Lounge. In the process of getting out all of this information that you've accumulated and continued to research over the years, that explains, of course, why we are up to Volume 4 of The Vault of Walt.
That is absolutely true.
You're not ever going to run out of stories, are you?
Well, when I wrote the first Vault of Walt, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be my only chance in the world to ever write a book about Disney. I seriously believe that. So I tried to jam in as much as I could, and, the best stories that I had. And again, with the Vault of Walt, I realized, you have so many people who, are interested in different things about Disney. So I divided it into 4 sections. One section was about Walt Disney, because I love Walt Disney, but other people are just sort of casually interested. And then a section on the Disney films, both animated and live action, and then a section on the Disney parks, and then there's a section on miscellaneous, that just didn't fit comfortably in anywhere else. But so in that first volume, I have that story about Walt's housekeeper who died a millionairess without knowing, because Walt would give her Disney stock on her birthday and at Christmas, and he said, hang on to this because this may be valuable someday. So she did, and she never even looked at it.
Without even checking the value.
Splits and all that. By the time she died, she was a millionaire. She didn't know she was a millionaire.
That's a great
I know,
story.
and so, and then you think, okay, that's all the stories. There's no more stories. But people kept buying the book. And I thought, well, maybe they want to hear a couple more stories. So then I did a second volume. And then, again, this year, we're out to Volume 4, and I thought, there's no more stories. There's no more stories. And if there are stories, there are no more good stories,
Surprise.
And then I started to put it together. And then in the Walt Disney section, I have all of the addresses and locations and history behind every place that he lived, including one of the houses that he lived. There were 2 people who were living there who were victims of the Charles Manson murders. They were living in the same house that Walt Disney had built.
Oh, my goodness.
On a happier note, in that same section, I list all of the books that you see in Walt's library on TV. when he's in his office.
Oh, wow.
I list all of those books, and again, Walt hadn't read some of these books. These were like, if somebody gave him a book, it went up on the shelf. So if they came visited him in the office, they could see that on the shelf there. But there are autographed books like from P.L. Travers, who, two Mary Poppins books. And then in the film story section, I go through how Tim Burton, made Frankenweenie. And one of the things that fascinated so many people is there's a movie by Universal called 40 Pounds of Trouble, where for 20 minutes,
Tony Curtis,
runs through Disneyland.
Yeah.
And it's wrong. He'll run through one area and then end up in another, and it's like, I went to Disneyland. Disneyland is my park. There's no possible way you can do that. And so why Walt allowed that film to be made and all of that in the background of Gertie the dinosaur. And then in the park stories, I talk about, the original concepts for Haunted Mansion that Ken Anderson did, and why Roger Rabbit's no longer in the parks and things like that. And then, in the other Disney stories, we cover some of the Disney animator pranks and hijinks, and Disney's relationship to the Rose Parade. And, you would think, okay, well, now you're finished. I'm already putting together stuff for Volume 5, including the story of the drunk Pinocchios.
I haven't heard that one.
It doesn't. Oh, you don't know this story?
I don't know the drunk Pinocchios.
And of course, it's not in J.B. Kaufman's book. J.B. Kaufman has written a wonderful book about Pinocchio. I recommend that you ask Santa to put that in your stocking, along with all the Jim Korkis books from Theme Park Press and Amazon. But the drunk Pinocchio story is when Pinocchio opened. They wanted it to be as big a success as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And so for the premiere, what they did is RKO, who was the distributor of the films, the Disney films at that time, hired 11 little people and put them in Pinocchio costumes and had them climb up a ladder up onto the top of the marquee. Okay, and they did this early in the morning. And so around lunchtime, what they did is they hoisted up some sandwiches and some beer, because they're waving at people down below and dancing. Sending up the beer was a bad idea. By 3 o'clock, it had gotten so warm, and the little people had gotten so much beer in them that they started to take off parts of the itchy Pinocchio costume. So they were all completely naked. They were peeing over the side because they're full of beer. They were shouting obscenities at the crowd. They were playing a crap game up there. People were yelling at them. The theater manager was out there. Put the clothes back on. There's children down here. And all. They wouldn't. The police had to come. They put up a ladder. These guys wouldn't put the clothes back on, so they got pillowcases and put pillowcases over them and would carry them down one at a time off of the marquee.
Oh, my gosh. Now, this isn't an urban legend. This is documented.
There's photos. There's photos. In fact, Paul Anderson at the Disney History Institute, you can Google that. There's a picture of the Pinocchios up there on top of the marquee, waving and all. And again, of course, you can see why Disney doesn't want this included in their official history.
It's definitely not the official version.
and not the official book on Pinocchio, right? But again, I can tell from your laughter, Tim, that this is a story you've enjoyed.
I have been thoroughly entertained by it. And see, this is the stuff that, I respect Disney history and I love the official version, but it's the stuff like this that takes all of that and gives it new life.
Again, as people like Bob Gurr and a lot of Disney legends were telling me, they said, we're Disney legends, but, we're not saints. We were making up a lot of this stuff as we went along. We were human beings, We made mistakes, but we learned from it, and we go on. And because I'm no longer, a Disney cast member, I can write about some of these stories, but I love Disney. I always tell people you can love the Disney brand, but still have concerns about how the Disney business makes some decisions.
Absolutely.
And because of that, Disney still has me as a freelance writer and contributor, and so I write a quarterly column for the Disney Vacation Club news magazine, the Disney Files magazine, and sometimes I write for the Disney Insider and the Mickey Monitor and things like that. But I think you can write about these things without being, there's some people out there now that there's almost that whole tabloid fascination, oh, Walt was anti-Semitic and racist and all.
Oh.
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. No, this is true, and Disney is part of this organization that's going to destroy the world. And no, come on,
It's an entertainment company.
What is this all about, And some of it, of course, is Disney itself has brought this on because they like to either downplay or never comment on things that are negative. And sometimes that works. There was that movie, what was that, Escape to Tomorrow or whatever?
Escape
that was
from
filmed
Tomorrow.
In the park. And I think the filmmakers were hoping that Disney was going to sue and take them to court because it would draw so much attention to them. But Disney ignored it. And basically, I don't think people even remember that film now. And if you saw the film, it's a terrible film.
I did. It's not a particularly good movie. I did talk to the director and two of the cast members, though, right when it came out. And that was an interesting conversation. I was fascinated by the guerrilla tactics that they had to use to shoot the film, mostly at Walt Disney World and a little bit at Disneyland. And that was interesting. But kind of an irony to that, though, while obviously this is not something that Disney wanted to officially acknowledge and they weren't going to take them to court because they weren't going to draw attention to it. Nevertheless, there is an entry for Escape from Tomorrow in an update of Dave Smith's Disneyland A to Z encyclopedia.
Really?
Yes. I was very surprised to see that it was in there.
Well, Dave, of course, is a completist. And, there's another new film that I'm interested in seeing that was shot in guerrilla fashion at Walt Disney World. And it's called Walt's Frozen Head.
I heard about that. That's
and
fairly recent,
Walt's
too, isn't it?
Frozen Head is kept down in the utilidors, and a new hire cast member discovers it. And the Disney executives will not let Walt go up to see what, Epcot and all looks like. And so this guy, brings him up and puts him in a stroller and takes him through the park. And again, with the technology that exists today, you can shoot in Walt Disney World.
You can shoot HD video with your iPhone.
Yeah, but you've got to be careful. You see, one of the things they did in Escape to Tomorrow is they didn't include the music in the attractions because that's still under copyright. And so if they had done that, they could have been sued for that. And there was no way they could have won that, as that goes through. But, even when the National Lampoon magazine, which I missed, was originally came out, it was like its 5th issue or its 7th issue. It wanted to attract attention because people didn't know what the National Lampoon magazine was. And so they had a cover of Minnie Mouse flashing. And she has little flower pasties on her chest. She's flashing.
Minnie, you brazen hussy.
And they did that specifically to try and get attention and to try and get Disney all upset and all of that so that people would start talking about National Lampoon. What Disney did is they just ignored it completely, and it extinguished.
Right.
And again, it was a magazine. It was only out for, 30 days or so and then disappeared. But again, National Lampoon, it turned out, didn't need that kind of publicity that, all of these things. Aren't all these fascinating stories?
These are wonderful stories. I love hearing these stories. So more stories to be told. What else are you working on these days?
Actually, I'm working on a super secret Disney-related book, which I think people will be very excited about. It has a foreword by Leonard Maltin.
Okay, so it's movie-related.
Nope.
Oh, darn.
Nope, not at all. Okay, that's 5 down, 10 to go. But it is related to Disney, and and in fact, one of the things that Maltin does in his foreword is he explains how he wrote the book, The Disney Films. And so here's the entire history of how do you do that when there's no internet, There's no other resource books out there. You know, how do you go about doing that? What are the challenges that you face? How do you put that together?
And for people who aren't familiar with the book, it's a series of reviews and a complete history of every single movie released by the Disney company and by Walt Disney during his lifetime.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, how that book was put together is, you know, at the time, Disney had a department where you could rent movies, Disney movies, you know, to show for your church group or Boy Scout troop or whatever, you know, to raise money. And so he literally watched all of those movies in order, and he rented them and ran them in his basement each weekend. And so he said, in the beginning, friends would come over, but then once we started to get into some of the live action stuff, because I was the only one sitting there with the projector clacking away, and you know, this was going on. Other contributors to this book are people like J.B. Kaufman, Jeff Curdy, Jim Fanning. Let's say there's 20 contributors to this book. Each of them have their own individual chapter in addition to the chapters that I have written.
Oh, wow.
Does this sound like an exciting book?
I'm on board. I am there. So
in fact,
in
one
ETA,
chapter,
when do you think we'll be able to actually see said
well,
secret book?
it was hopefully going to be out by December. Now it looks like maybe January or February. We're doing because again, things take longer than you think they're going to take.
Yes.
And you know, it happens with many of these books. You know, the Everything I Know I Learned from Disney Animated Feature Films, I thought, this is just going to be a quick, simple, easy book to do. You know, a year later, I'm going, how is this not finished?
It just keeps going.
And again, part of that is just, I feel a great responsibility to people who pay money to buy my book. I want them to feel that they are getting value for that book, that they are getting more than what they paid for that book. And it's a book that will stand the test of time and that they can keep going back to and use as a reliable reference. Because for every fact that I put in there, I try to find 3 independent sources to confirm that. And that's sometimes very difficult because sometimes the story was told to me by Ward Kimball or by Mark Davis or by Ken Anderson, you know, and it's like, they were there, they lived that and all that, but I can't accept that as truth because they may have only just seen their part of it, you know? Or sometimes people have their own agendas where they want to improve their contribution to something, or they want to downgrade somebody else's contribution for whatever, you know. Again, these were human beings. They had grudges, you know, and they were still trying to get back at people. But in my books, what I try to do is I try to find 3 independent sources. And by independent sources, that means somebody didn't, you know, cut and paste this and put it there, because you take a look and you go, that's the exact same phrasing. That's, you know, they must have got it from, you know, this or this, you know, what can I find? And you go to outside things. You don't just go to Disney documentation. You go to things like census reports and obscure, here's something, sometimes celebrity biographies, like one on Buddy Ebsen, you know, might have a chapter about working at Disney. And so here's a story most people don't know. Everybody's seen the July 17th Dateline Disneyland show, right? And one of the big numbers is in Frontierland, where they sing the song Bang Goes Old Betsy, and they've got Davy Crockett's rifle, Old Betsy, and they're dancing around and all of that. Well, this is in Buddy Ebsen's biography, and I went through and I triple-checked it, and it's true. That morning, a magazine photographer said, well, I want to take a picture of, you know, Fess Parker dressed up as Davy Crockett, because he's very popular at that time, and I want him holding the rifle. Okay, that's fine. Okay, get Fess the rifle. Where's the rifle? Look in the trunk. No, what? Look over there. Where? They had forgotten to bring the rifle. Filming is going to happen within the next hour, hour and a half, tops. There's not enough time to go back to the studio, try to find it, get it, and bring it back in time. and they're going to do this whole song and dance about this rifle. Buddy Ebsen was a friend of Walter Knott, who ran Knott's Berry Farm. And one of the things Walter Knott had at Knott's Berry Farm on display was a collection of antique firearms. So Ebsen phones, and he says, do you have, a rifle from this time period and whatever? Sure. And so it was brought over with a police escort. Because, again, you had to get through all the crowds and all the traffic. And, again, this is a valuable antique. And so when you see your thing of Dateline Disneyland and you see Fess Parker and Buddy Ebsen, and they're dancing away, and they're singing about Bang Goes Old Betsy, and they've got that rifle, that is not Davy Crockett's rifle. It's the one from Knott's Berry Farm.
That is great.
And again, those of you who are listening, if these are the types of stories that you like, you should be picking up, the 4 volumes of Vault of Walt, or the secret stories from Walt Disney World, or whatever. Because again, Disney is never going to write books about these things.
No.
That's one of the reasons I wrote a book about Song of the South. And again, I didn't take any position that, yes, you should light your torches and storm the Disney castle so that they released it on DVD or whatever. I just listed the facts. This is how they cast the people. This is what the original script was going to look like. This is why they changed it. This is why they cast the people that they cast. This is what the premiere looked like. So the facts are out there, because a lot of people, oh yes, that was so racist, and it's about slaves. And no, it's not. It takes place after the Civil War, and the people who are working on the plantation, they're sharecroppers. That's why the father has to go back to Atlanta, because he's got to raise money to pay these people who are working, in the fields. And at one point, Uncle Remus says, I'm not putting up with any of this junk anymore. I'm just packing up and leaving. If he was a slave, he couldn't do that, because he'd be property.
Mm-hmm.
But again, since people haven't seen this film since the 80s, it's like, yeah, and Walt was racist. That's why,
Yeah, it's certainly an example of the legend, kind of.
Yes, overcoming that.
Overcoming
and again,
the facts, yeah.
And again, a little fun fact that I discovered as I was writing the book, that, there's that whole scene where Uncle Remus is saying, Mr. Bluebird on my shoulder. The bluebird that is whistling, that whistling was done by Clarence Nash, the voice of Donald Duck.
Aha, good to know.
Because in vaudeville, in Chautauqua, he had a act where he did bird calls. And so sometimes he did little incidental things in the Disney films. And so when Mr. Bluebird is warbling away there, just like a bluebird, that's the voice of Donald Duck doing that. I should be charging you $100 an hour, or every portion thereof, for all of this information.
Your check is in the mail. Sure. Yeah, it's there. Again, your 2 most recent books, The Vault of Walt Volume 4, and then Secret Stories. They're not secret anymore. Secret Stories of Walt Disney World. Things you never knew. Available from themeparkpress.com and from Amazon, and 8 other books that you can look at.
It's a perfect Christmas gift. Get it for yourself. Get it for your friends. Remember that I'm an orphan. And it's the holidays.
This is the part where in editing I'll put like some really somber violin music underneath.
And I'm old and broke, if that helps. So this is good, Tim. It's always a joy talking with you, because again, you're one of those people out there who really keeps the Disney magic alive. I think your listeners will agree with me that you obviously not only have a passion for Disney, but a great fondness and happiness about Disney and Disney history.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Coming from you, Jim, I really do appreciate that.
And again, thank you so much for having me on, because I love sharing these stories with people, because, these are like treasures in Captain Hook's treasure chest, or Blackbeard's treasure chest or Long John Silver's treasure, and they need to be shared. They need to be distributed. And as long as people are telling each other stories, they might as well be telling people the right stories, and they might as well be telling people new stories, right? And the same ones that we hear over and over. I'm sure you have too heard the same ones over, and you just groan and you go, okay,
here we go again. But yeah,
because I'm sure people come to you as a Disney expert and they go, did you know such and such? Did you know how much Walt Disney World weighs? So,
one day we've got to figure that out. Now, was this with or without people?
See, there you go. See, there's all sorts of these variables that you have to deal with, And again, this is an exciting time to be living because of the new technology, because of the internet and all that. People now have access to libraries around the world and people around the world. And suddenly a lot of things are coming out of hiding. There were people who worked at Disney who literally wrote their memoirs, and then they were lost for decades and have just been discovered within the last year or two. Homer Brightman, who is a Disney writer. Fascinating stuff, because you're reading the people who were there and seeing it through their eyes. Jimmy Johnson, who created Disneyland Records.
The music,
The fascinating thing about his autobiography is he wrote it, and then the day after he finished it, he died.
Oh my gosh!
And so I know what a frightening story that is. And again, that was just filed away, and material that none of us ever knew before. Now that comes out. Disney history is like a gigantic jigsaw puzzle, and so everybody has different pieces. And if you share your piece or a couple of your pieces, other people might share theirs, and they might fit and all that, and then you get the wider perspective of what's going on. Didier Getz, who does
DDA is a good friend of the show. We've had him on. He's been on a number of times.
The Walt's People series, so valuable. Interviews with people who actually work there. But his latest, well, it's not his latest book. His latest book is on concept art of Disney artists. But his book on Walt and Roy's vacation in 1935, and how that
grand what is it, the Grand Tour or
and how that influenced so many things at Disney. And what was great too was Didier was able to debunk things. Everybody knew that Walt met Mussolini, and
no,
you take a look through the facts. There's no possible way. There was no time frame or location where those two would have ever have hooked up during that time.
So many great stories out there. And Jim, thank you for being right there on the front lines and getting the real story and getting the truth.
You don't have to wait 2 years before you have me back.
No,
if you like this other book, when it comes out, have me back on.
We got the secret book coming out, so you're going to be back here in a couple of months, all right?
Mm-hmm.
All righty, Jim, a pleasure as always, sir. Thank you so much for hanging out today with me in the Mouse Castle Lounge.
And have a wonderful Disney day.
Earlier this month, I took a trip up to the San Francisco Bay Area to pay a visit to my friends at the Walt Disney Family Museum. I finally got to see their special exhibition, Disney and Dolly, Architects of the Imagination. By all means, go see it. It runs through January 3rd. While I was there, I was also invited to drive an hour down the road to San Jose to visit the Winchester Mystery House. Now, unless you've lived in the Bay Area, like I once did, you may not be familiar with the Winchester Mystery House. It's a sprawling Victorian mansion in San Jose once owned by the widow Sarah Winchester. Sarah's late husband, William Winchester, was heir to the Winchester firearms fortune. Sarah was quite well off financially. In 1884, Sarah purchased an unfinished farmhouse in the Santa Clara Valley and commenced adding on to it for the next 38 years. At the time of Sarah's death in 1922, the house spread over 6 acres and contained 160 rooms, 2,000 doors, 10,000 windows, 47 stairways, 47 fireplaces, 13 bathrooms, and 6 kitchens. Why Sarah kept building all those years remains a mystery. Was she distraught over the deaths of her husband and a daughter in infancy? Did she believe that continually building would somehow appease evil spirits? Was she just a kindly woman who chose to spend her money supporting local builders, carpenters, landscapers, and artisans? Whatever the reason, the continuous construction resulted in a labyrinth of rooms and hallways, staircases running into ceilings, doorways leading to nowhere, and all manner of building oddities. You can still tour the house today and marvel at its mind-boggling construction and design. Visit during the holidays and you can see the house decorated in Christmas finery with over 20 custom-designed Christmas trees. On select nights, you can enjoy, like I did, the spirit of Christmas with carolers, festive beverages, and holiday treats. Don't be surprised if you see some snowfall, too. Here to tell us more about the Winchester Mystery House is Janin Bomey, my second guest today in the Mouse Castle Lounge. Okay, we're having a little change of pace today. I'm at the Winchester Mystery House with tour director Janin Bomey. How are you doing today, Janin?
I'm doing well, thank you. We're having a lot of fun here.
Yes, we are. Actually, I said today, it is tonight. We are here in the nighttime, kind of a little chilly out here in the front porch of this immense, bizarre house. Now, I grew up in the Bay Area, so I am kind of familiar with the Winchester Mystery House, but for people who aren't, what can you tell us about the history of this crazy structure?
Well, this is the creation of Sarah Lockwood Pardee Winchester, and she was married to the second president of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the gun that won the West. And she inherited quite a bit of money from her husband when he died, sadly at the young age of 43. After a few years, she moved out here with a couple of her sisters, and she built this house. It was a hobby for her. She hired a bunch of carpenters, a bunch of gardeners, and she created this wonderful little estate. It was actually a working estate. She grew plums, apricots, walnuts here and sold them in the market. And in the meantime, building, always building, always building. And I think she was just having a really good time.
Now, the urban legend is that Mrs. Winchester wasn't quite right and was very guilt-ridden with all of the people that had been killed by the product that her husband was involved with. Is that just an urban legend, or is there any truth to that?
You know, that's the legend, and that's the legend that we tell. I think that back then people viewed guns very differently. They saw them as a useful tool and a necessary thing, and I don't know if she felt any guilt. It's hard to say. It's possible, I suppose, but I don't think that was a driving emotion in her life.
But it kind of feeds the legend, though, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Now, how big again is the house?
It's supposed to be about 24,000 feet, as near as we can figure. It was originally 7 stories high. That was before 1906, and the San Francisco earthquake caused a little damage. Now it's 4 stories high, and like I said, about 24,000 square feet.
And for the holidays, you're doing something a little bit special this year. What are you doing?
Yes, it's more special than the last couple of years. We have a wonderful Spirit of Christmas tour that tells some of the story of Sarah, focuses on her wonderful art glass windows, her mansion, and a lot of Christmas customs that we all are very familiar with and where they started. We also have snow here. We have our own little microclimate here at the Winchester House. And since Mrs. Winchester was a New England girl, her memories when she came out here would have been of white Christmases. And it actually did snow here a few of the years that she lived here. So it must have been kind of nice for her.
Sarah Winchester had a lot of money to spend, obviously, on this massive house. It's a pretty innovative house for its time. What are some of the details and some of the elements to it that were kind of state of the art for her time?
It was extremely innovative, and though they used to say that she invented some of the things in here, like the scrub boards in the sinks in the laundry room, though actually I found that was invented by someone else. But she always got the most modern conveniences for her servants to make their lives easier. So, for example, in the laundry room, she did have built-in sinks, porcelain with built-in scrub boards and soap holders to make their lives easier. She also had hoses, garden hoses all over the place, and people don't realize that the garden hose was a brand new thing back in the 1880s when she lived here, brand new. And she had them installed all over the house. So you didn't have to, lug watering cans up to water the plants. She had plants all over the mansion. She loved plants. She had, let's see what else. She had a shower, which was extremely modern for the time. You only found showers at that time in the homes of the wealthy. And they were actually sold, it was called a needle shower, what she has, and sold as an adjunct to good health. to stimulate your skin and your internal organs. Everybody else took baths at that time, especially if you couldn't afford a shower. But yeah, she had a lot of very modern conveniences.
And it's the little things that fascinate me. And this is actually the one thing I remember from a tour I took here some years back. There were these little brass inserts that are in the corners of all the staircases.
Yes.
Why are those there?
The dust corners. People love those. Yeah, that's a clever little invention that keeps the dust out of the corners in the staircase. And anyone who's ever swept a staircase knows how annoying it is trying to get the dirt out of the corners. So those things just prevent the dirt from getting in there in the first place.
And again, for the holidays, what are some of the other activities and entertainment that people can see here?
Okay, yeah, you can take the Spirit of Christmas tour. You can enjoy the snowfall here on the Hour. We also have Sheree's chocolatiers from downtown San Jose selling their wares here, wonderful chocolate, since 1912. We have, we have someone doing Victorian silhouettes, cutting out Victorian silhouettes. We have Mrs. Santa roaming the grounds, taking children's wish lists to Santa Claus. We also have a Saint Nick in the house, so people can take a picture with him. We have wandering minstrels. We have carolers. We have all kinds of Christmas cheer.
That sounds like a lot of fun. And how long does Christmas last at the Winchester Mystery House?
Actually, it lasts until about December 28th, I believe, this year. And St. Nick won't be here after Christmas Day, but the rest of the fun will be going on. There's hot Christmas drinks to buy, and I think you tried one of those yourself.
I did try one of those.
How was it?
Thumbs up.
All right, excellent. And other Christmas treats. So lots of fun.
All right. Well, Janin, thank you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and thank you.
To you. Thanks so much for coming to see us. It's been a lot of fun talking to you, and I hope that you will come back and see us again.
To find out more about the Spirit of Christmas at the Winchester Mystery House, you can visit their website at winchestermysteryhouse.com. And that will do it for this edition of the Mouse Castle Lounge. Many thanks to Jim Korkis and Jen Bomi for being my guests. Stay up to date with everything going on in the Mouse Castle Lounge. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud. You can also download the free Mouse Castle Lounge app, which you can get right now by going to themousecastle.com and clicking Get the App. Anthony Reynolds and I host Inside the Mouse Castle with your weekly dose of Disney news, information, and commentary. We'll be back again Monday night with our spoiler-filled review of Star Wars The Force Awakens, so please join us. The Mouse Castle Lounge is taking a break for the holidays. We'll be back in January with more great guests from the world of Disney. The Mouse Castle Lounge is not affiliated with the Walt Disney Company. I just like to talk about them. I'm Tim Calloway. It's been a blast as always, so let's do this again real soon. Merry Christmas.